In this lesson, we're going to look at some more examples of how we determine ionic formulas from pairs of elements or polyatomic ions. Let's look at an example with NH4+, which is a polyatomic ion, and chlorine. We know that the NH4 has a +1 charge. When we look at chlorine and we look at the ion that forms from chlorine, we know that we're going to get Cl-1 because chlorine has 7 valence electrons, so it's going to gain 1 electron to have a 1- charge. We do our crisscross down and we find that we get NH4Cl. We look at our charges and we get +1 plus a -1 equals 0. So overall we have a neutral charge on the compound. Let's look at an example with Mg and NO3-. We know that magnesium has a 2+ charge when it forms an ion because it has 2 valence electrons. We're given the charge on nitrate, which is -1. We crisscross down to find our subscripts and we get MgNO3 2. Because we need to indicate that we have 2 of the NO3 groups, we have to use parentheses around the NO3. That lets us know that there are 2 NO3 groups. It's not just about the nitrogen or oxygen, it's 2 of the groups. One way to recognize that this compound has a polyatomic ion in it is that it is an ionic compound. We have a metal and it has more than 2 elements in it. So ionic compounds with more than 2 elements, we know those are going to have a polyatomic ion in there. You don't need to memorize the polyatomic ion names, formulas, or charges, but you should recognize when something is or isn't a polyatomic ion. We look at our charges and we see +2. +2 times -1 is going to be equal to 0. Let's look at an example with calcium and phosphate ion. So calcium, when it forms an ion, has a +2 charge. Phosphate is PO4 with overall 3- charge. We do our crisscross down and we get Ca3PO4 2. Notice that I use the parentheses because I need 2 phosphate groups. For polyatomic ions where there's more than 1 in the compound, we must use parentheses around them. In our earlier example of NH4Cl, we only had 1 NH4 group, so parentheses were not needed because there was only 1. If there's 2 or more, we must use parentheses around the polyatomic ion and only the polyatomic ion. We never put parentheses around a single element. We look at our charges and we see 3 times +2 plus 2 times -3, and we get an overall sum of 0, indicating that we have a neutral compound.